I'm here with Dr. Chenyang Liu, Director for AI Health and Fulbright Professor of Computer Science and Engineering here at Washington University. Dr. Liu, you are leading our branch of AI related to redefining Chiari malformations with our large grant project. How do you see AI benefiting healthcare overall?
Well, AI is becoming very powerful data-driven tools, right, to understand our diseases better and also to support clinical decisions and devise more precise treatment. In particular, right, we have a lot of complex diseases, and AI is able to learn from multidimensional clinical data and then define phenotypes of this complex disease, so that allow us to define more precise treatment for different subtypes of patients.
So how are we using this with our Chiari patient population?
Right, so that's precisely what we are trying to do, right, with AI for Chiari malformation. Chiari malformation happens to be a very complex and heterogeneous disease. So we are collecting this large amount of data in different dimensions that we collect. And then we use AI algorithms and specifically clustering algorithms to try to derive these clinically meaningful and distinctive clusters of patients. The idea is each cluster would correspond to different phenotypes of patients with different underlying characteristics, which means that we could leverage this information, right, to define more precise treatment tailored for each group of patients.
Well, certainly our Chiari patients are very diverse and they all experience a wide range of symptoms. How are we hoping to break down these clusters?
Right. So the idea is once you define these different clusters by learning from these very complex data, each cluster of patients would represent different underlying biological and physiological, right, characteristics, right? Which means then the physicians can take these different, right, clusters of patients and, do deeper analysis, right, and devise, right, treatment that's specifically tailored, right, for this, particular cluster of patients. Then from there, right, so hopefully we can define more effective treatment for this specific, right, tailored for this individual group. The idea is instead of one type of treatment for all, right, you do more precise medicine, right, for each subtype.
Right. So I know you're drawing your data from several different sources that we've pulled together with our Park-Reeves Consortium. I know you're looking at clinical data as well as genetic data, some radiographic imaging data as well. When you're deriving these clusters, how many clusters do you feel like we're coming into? Is it hundreds of clusters, or have we narrowed it down utilizing these data sets?
Right. So there's clearly a trade-off between, right, the number of clusters that you want to have versus, how representative, right, each cluster would be. So in fact, right, we, instead of predetermine, right, the number of clusters, we leverage, right, AI algorithms to tell us, right, the number of clusters the data is showing us, right? So for example, in our preliminary analysis, we identified 3 different clusters with distinctive characteristics that would potentially be useful to derive, right, different kind of treatment strategies for each type.
Oh, fantastic. So what's been so far, I know you're in the beginning stages of this research and this development. What have been some fascinating findings for you on your end, or at least maybe from the engineering side, different tools you've had a chance to use?
Right. I think the fascinating part is how do you, connect the clustering results that's learned by AI purely from data, right, versus how do that correspond and complement, right, or what clinical insights as clinicians already have. So what's fascinating to me was, on one hand, a lot of the characteristics of these clusters identified by AI turns out to be quite meaningful, right, to our clinician experts. At the same time, the clinical insights and the AI findings are quite complementary to each other as well. So there are, variables that identified by the AI as being, highly important to discover and define these different clusters. Turns out to be variables that clinicians haven't thought about before, right? At the same time, there are also, right, important parameters that clinicians have strong belief and evidence, right, that should be useful to redefine Chiari malformation, but that were overlooked by the AI algorithm. It seems like, these observations are quite complementary to each other. Hence, an important part of the research is how do we combine the clinical insights and the data-driven AI methods, right, synergistically to define the most distinctive as well as clinically meaningful, clusters of patients.
And I know you're partnering with one of our neurosurgeons here, Dr. Jacob Greenberg, to offer more of that clinical perspective. How has that changed the way you, as an engineer, are looking at the development of AI in healthcare?
Right. Oh, certainly, it's a very helpful learning experience for myself, right? So as AI scientists, we tend to, basically push these data, right, through these AI algorithms, and the AI algorithm would, generate these answers. What we realize, the more we work with clinicians, the more we realize that sometimes, we are overlooking, right, important clinical insights, right? So, we discover, right, these wonderful clusters, right, from these multimodal data set, but then the clinicians look at it, right, clinicians such as Jacob, and but wait a minute, right? There are these important variables that are not being included, right, by these AI models as important. So they would be really meaningful and helpful, right, in clinical decisions and devising therapy, right, strategies. So basically, we have to learn from each other, right, and incorporate a lot of these clinical insights into our AI models, so that it's both, right, data-driven and also clinical knowledge-based.
Well, that's exciting to see that the partnership of the clinical team and the engineering team has really opened up some new doors and some new insights into both the development of these models and the disease process itself. Are there any limitations or pitfalls that you've come across?
Yep. So I think that's basically the point I was making to elaborate it. So people, certainly have seen, right, AI is capable of learning, great things, right, from data. But we should also be careful because AI sometimes they do learn sort of superficial correlations, right, between these data, right? And sometimes it generates, right, clusters, for example, that are accidental, right, instead of fundamental, right? This is why a very synergistic collaboration between clinicians and AI experts become very essential, right? So basically, we have to combine the clinical insights with the AI methods. We have to carefully review, right, these AI-generated results, and we have to carefully incorporate the clinical insight. At the same time, right, so AI does bring significant value because we did discover things that AI discovered that were overlooked by clinicians as well.
That's fascinating. Is this something that we can reproduce on a global level outside of our data here at Washington University?
So that's a paramount question, right? So one inherent limitation of any AI model is it is trained based on a particular cohort of patients, right? So ultimately, we have to make this model useful for new patients, for patients at different parts of the world and different medical centers and different characteristics. This is why reproducibility or generalizability of these models become really, really important, right? To get started on this process, we certainly take these multi-center data, right, from our current data set, we split them by data centers, right? So we withhold a subset of the data of the medical centers data, right, as external validation, sets, right? So then we train the model on one subset, right, of the medical centers data. Then once we derive the clusters, we repeat the process on the external data set from these other medical centers. Then we compare, right, the clustering results across these two groups, the internal and the external group. And we did so far, find the results to be rather promising, right? In a sense, we tend to discover fairly similar clusters with similar patient characteristics, right, between the internal and external clustering results. Now, that certainly is not the final answer to any of this, and we certainly need, right, bigger studies, right, and involving more diverse data sets, right, from different parts of the world, and to validate these models further.
So that's really exciting to hear. Another use of our multi-center data that we house here with our 46 centers that have been contributing data since 2011, you've really been able to not just model clustering for individual patients, but to be able to test its reproducibility on a much larger scale. And it sounds like you've had some success with that it really does seem to be reproducible at this point.
It is. This large heterogeneous multi-center data set is very valuable to AI research here.
Very good. Have you had opportunities in other areas that you've been working with AI in health to utilize multi-center data in the same way?
Certainly, today, right, so the generalizability of AI models become a paramount concern, right, in any sort of healthcare domain. For example, we are doing multiple multi-center trials, right, for AI models for example, weight management for elderly adults. We also have multi-center studies for clinician burnouts, right, across multiple medical centers as well. Certainly, this is becoming quite essential today.
Very good. What kinds of, as we move forward in our research to redefine the diagnosis of Chiari, what sort of data or maybe the diversity of the data would you like to see the program bring in to help build a better model for you?
Right. So that's a very good question. And so far, the clusters are derived based on sort of routinely collected clinical data and radiographic, right, data. We think this is the right way to derive the cluster because we want these AI models to be useful in clinical practice, right? So hence the clusters have to be defined based on routinely collected data. But this being said, certainly there's tremendous value in looking at other type of data, such as genomic data, right? Such as advanced imaging data. This is to further dive into the derived clusters and then gain a deeper understanding, right, of the underlying characteristics, right, of these different phenotypes of patients.
Very good. Well, that's really exciting. I know we're really lucky to have somebody with your expertise as a part of our team. And so thank you so much for coming and sitting with us today and talking and sharing all that you're doing. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. It certainly has been a lot of fun collaborating.
It's been really fun. And we're excited to see what's coming in the future. Great. Thank you.
Thanks.